Great things come in small packages, especially when it is a brand new land at Disneyland Resort.
You're listening to Castle Talk Radio. We're live on the airwaves with Becca and Jessica. Now let's jump into this week's episode.
It's Becca here, and we are back in our Land to Land series celebrating the 70th anniversary of Disneyland, which is that celebration is winding down. Disneyland has turned 71 years old, and it is hard to believe that we are almost done with this series for Disneyland Park. Today, we're going to talk about New Orleans Square, which is the first new land that was added to Disneyland after its official opening. Before we dive into New Orleans Square and all the amazing little details that are there. I just want to say on the Main Street episode, I accidentally kept calling it Walt Disney One Man's Dream. Now, if you are a bi-coastal Disney fan, you know where that came from. The one on Main Street USA in Disneyland with the Walt animatronic is actually called Walt Disney A Magical Life. So I do want to apologize for that right there. That's what happens when you have bicoastal information in your heads. Now let's move on to New Orleans Square because this is actually one of the smaller lands in Disneyland, but it's also one of the most immersive and detail-filled areas. And I think a lot of people just tend to think of it as a walkway from Adventureland to Bayou Country, and it's not. It's very immersive. So let's dive in. Just like Main Street introduces guests to Walt's idealized America, New Orleans Square, that's how we say it at Disneyland, even though we normally say New Orleans. Um, New Orleans Square transports them to a romanticized version of that one specific American city. So New Orleans Square was inspired by Walt's love and appreciation for the food, music, architecture, and the culture of New Orleans. Walt visited New Orleans multiple times and developed relationships with people there, including the mayor at the time, and hopefully I'm saying this right, Victor Shiro. And in June 1959, Mayor Shiro named Walt Disney an honorary citizen of New Orleans. Walt kept the mayor updated while he went through this edition of New Orleans Square, which is the last land that Walt personally worked on and developed. Walt and his team were especially interested in jazz, the foods, antique shops, and courtyards and narrow passageways and the decorative ironwork. And they loved the French Quarter in New Orleans. So they wanted to bring all of that in to New Orleans Square. This is gonna get me the saying it the two different ways during this episode. He was also obsessed with pirates, you guys. And hopefully I say the pirate name like Jean Lafayette, I believe is how that one is pronounced. Was obsessed, obsessed. So, New Orleans Square was dedicated on July 24th, 1966. It was the first entirely new theme land added to Disneyland, and it was also the last one that Walt Disney himself got to see and be at when it was dedicated. And New Orleans Square was one of the final major Disneyland projects he oversaw before his death in December of 1966. And although it opened in 1966 and Walt saw the dedication, the two major attractions were not operating yet. Pirates of the Caribbean opened in 1967 and Haunted Mansion opened in 1969. So it had no rides available when it first opened. The land is, as I mentioned, a romanticized interpretation of New Orleans rather than an exact recreation of one street or neighborhood. But when you go into the land, I want you to pay attention to things like the wrought iron balconies, the shutters and French doors. There's hanging plants and flowers. There's courtyards and decorative staircases. One of the most popular ones is the Court of Angels, which used to be available to the public, but now has been closed off. It is part of the entrance into Club 33, an exclusive club that is also in New Orleans Square. Um, and then also there are narrow streets and tucked away walkways and alleyways and signs for fictional businesses and residents all along the area as well. This land is designed vertically. Like we're normally, and Main Street's the same way as well. Most of us focus on ground level, right? That's what we see with our eyes very easily. But if you look up, some of the best details are on the balconies, the rooftops, the upper story windows. And I definitely hope you will start looking up a little more in any land that's kind of double storied because that's where a lot of hidden gems are. So, the first thing you'll notice in New Orleans Square about the music is that it's jazz and instrumental music background. And this is obviously intentional because he wanted that feel. And then you'll have the sound of the Disneyland Railroad going, which of course, he loved the railroad. We talked about this in the Main Street episode, but it also plays a part in that New Orleans area because you hear like the steam from it. You'll hear sounds coming from Pirates of the Caribbean and live entertainment sometimes. So you have the touring like little pirate band that goes around. It is definitely an atmospheric area, and then after dark, oh my gosh, when it lights up and the lanterns and the restaurants are illuminated, it is gorgeous. Now, not part of New Orleans Square, but because you load in Frontierland, but definitely there to play into the atmosphere there is the Mark Twain Riverboat and the sailing ship Columbia. If you want to learn more about those, you can go listen to our Frontierland episode from earlier in this series. So let's talk about the ride. So we have Pirates of the Caribbean. It opened after Walt passed on March 18th, 1967. It was the final Disneyland attraction that Walt personally supervised the development, even though he died before its opening. So a lot of us have heard the story that the original concept was a walk through wax museum about pirate history, but Disney's audio animatronic technology was developing so well that the project evolved into a boat ride filled with details, scenes, moving figures that we have all come to know and love. So the theme is that you begin in a peaceful Louisiana bayou before traveling deeper into the pirate story. And of course, we have the two famous drops here. This is different than the version at Walt Disney World because our drops are designed with a purpose, and that is to take you underneath that Disneyland Railroad and underground so that we don't take up as much space. We don't have the space at Disneyland that Walt Disney World was able to have. And so the Imagineers had to get creative with how we would um, be able to utilize the space and make these attractions. And what's funny is even though Walt Disney World had so much more space, the Disneyland version of Pirates of the Caribbean is longer, it has more scenes, and is generally regarded as the better version of the ride between the two. Now, it's important to know, like some of you young ones out there may not realize this. My kids always ask these things. They always say, "What movie is this from?" on things. Like if they hear a song, they're like, "What song is this movie in?" And I'll, or what song is this movie in? What movie is this song in? All this stuff. But this ride actually came before the movie. The movie was based off of the ride, not the other way around. And so it's kind of weird to think about now because right now everything seems to be built off of Disney's IP, off of their movies. But that was not the case for these older rides and specifically for Pirates of the Caribbean and Haunted Mansion. Also inside of where you load and everything with the Haunted Mansion, the Blue Bayou restaurant is visible, and we'll talk a little bit more about the Blue Bayou here in a minute. I have ridden Pirates of the Caribbean a million times, but they did just recently replace a feature in it during its recent updates, and it now has an animatronic in the treasure room that shows the curse. And, I wasn't sure what I was gonna think of it. I held off my judgment until I wrote it, and you know what, guys? It's not awful. I feel like people zooming in on it on their videos on social media makes it out to be a lot worse than it is. So definitely give it a chance. So let's move on to the Haunted Mansion because I think this podcast is going to end up being longer than I expected. The Haunted Mansion officially opened at Disneyland on August 1969. The exterior was constructed actually, though, between 62 and 63. So long time before the attraction opened. For years, guests would see the completed mansion, but they couldn't go in. It's like when your favorite ride is down and you just can't ride it, but you have to keep walking past it. That's kinda how I relate to this. So development was delayed partly because Imagineers were reassigned to projects for the 1964 to 1965 New York's World Fair, but also because, there were some creative differences. So for those of you that don't know the story, and I don't remember their names, but there were two different Imagineers assigned to this project. One wanted to go the more like funhouse, whimsical, haunted mansion, and the other one wanted to be more dark and like scary. And so there was this creative difference. In the end, they ended up kind of playing both, where the beginning is a little bit more dark and scary. And then as you continue, it gets a little bit more whimsical and you have the singing ghosts and all of that kind of stuff. So this is one of the reasons it took so long to complete this ride, plus the World's Fair, plus you had Walt Disney's death in there. So a lot of things happened that slowed this down. But of course, some of the features we've got to talk about in here is the stretching room. Again, in Disneyland, it plays a different purpose than it does in Walt Disney World. In Disneyland, this is actually an elevator taking you below ground, again, to avoid the railway and go behind the scenes so because they didn't have that space to make it all up there and up front. Other great things that people love about it is the endless hallway. Of course, Madame Leota, the seance room, and we did talk about um, Leota's window on Main Street in that episode. And then the hitchhiking ghosts that come along with you for a ride. So we love this ride. And in Disneyland, it gets another little special something, and that is during the Halloween time and holidays, the Haunted Mansion transforms into Tim Burton's The Nightmare Before Christmas, or as we call it, Haunted Mansion Holiday. That's what I meant to say. It doesn't transform into the Nightmare Before Christmas. Those characters come, and we get the Haunted Mansion Holiday. So this usually kicks off whenever Halloween starts, and in 2026, that is very early. We are kicking it off on August 21st, and then it usually goes through the new year and even a week or two extra at that point before they close it down to switch it back. And sometimes these closures will also go a little longer because they'll do their maintenance during those closures as well. They're like, we're already closing the ride anyway. Let's get it done. So just be aware if you're traveling in August or if you're traveling in January or February, you may see the ride closed. And of course, there's tons of hidden details and areas to explore in um New Orleans Square. So if you go back, you've got lots of little shops, you've got decorative balconies and the windows upstairs that I kind of already talked about. There's fountains and plants and ornamental ironwork, but also like changes in the pavement and the architecture that separate this land from Adventureland, Frontierland, and Bayou Country. So let's talk about there's also the Disneyland Railroad that comes through here, which could be considered a ride by many. And this is also one of the locations where the steam engines will release their steam. And so you get a little bit longer stop there. Another fun little tidbit is that if you are near the railroad station, if you listen closely, you can hear a telegraph being sent in Morse code. And that telegraph is Walt's opening day speech. So that's kind of a fun little tidbit there. We have Club 33 and 21 Royal Street. 21 Royal Street, for some reason that's sounding not incorrect to me right now, but I'm pretty sure it's right. 21 Royal Street. Okay. So Club 33 is a private membership club located in New Orleans Square. You have to be a member or know a member in order to go in. And it has a lot of little hidden details and things inside of it. You can shop Club 33 merch in there. It's pretty exclusive, but at the same time, it feels like almost everyone knows someone that can get you in there. So, um, just put those wishes out into the world and you might end up getting to be able to go in there. The other exclusive area is 21 Royal Street, and that is what used to be the Pirates of the Caribbean suites at Disneyland. So for a long time, there was like a dream suite there, right? And it's up above the Pirates ride entrance where you see the balcony and stuff, and people probably know sometimes um, Johnny Depp came out there as Captain Jack Sparrow before he did his little ride thing and stuff like that. So, that used to be a dream suite that they would grant stays to or that you could rent if you were extremely rich and well connected. But they've since switched that back to a dining now all the rooms are still intact, but it's now a dining thing, and it's 21 Royal Street, and it's like $15,000, and you get to bring, I think it's 12 or 15 people or something in that price, and yeah, just you can go check out people's social media coverage of when they have done this with a group of friends. And then the last thing to touch on, as we're already over time, but oh well, is the restaurant. So, like I mentioned, we have Blue Bayou Restaurant, which is located inside of the Pirates of the Caribbean area. Um, you you dine beside the bayou scene with the loading area and everything, and there's seating on the water, see outside. It looks like it's night there all the time. It's beautiful. I've not eaten there in years. Does need a reservation. It is somewhat pricey for the food you get. The atmosphere is what you're paying for there. So just know that, okay? Next up we have Cafe Orleans. This is another one that you would need a reservation for. And I did just eat here on my most recent trip. And also I ate there in May when I was there as well. And it has New Orleans inspired dishes. And if you sit outside, you get a view of the rivers of America and the walkways there. And this is where you can also get the Monte Cristo, and they have lots of different other options. They have gumbo, and they list it as a starter, but you can also get a entree size gumbo. Some of the people that I was dining with in May did that. So it's a great sit down meal without that dark environment at the Blue Bayou and a little bit better pricing than the Blue Bayou has. So I definitely suggest checking it out if you want a sit down restaurant meal, but you don't want to do the Blue Bayou or sit somewhere or go somewhere like Carthay Circle that's a little more expensive. And of course, we can't talk about New Orleans Square without mentioning the Mint Julep Bar. This is where you can get your Mickey shaped beignets, and also a mint julep, though my friend Leslie, that is one of the co-founders of Disneyland with Kids, would argue they're not true mint juleps because they are non-alcoholic. Um, and then connected to that is the newest restaurant, and that is in New Orleans Square, and that is Tiana's Palace. And this is based off of Princess Tiana's restaurant from The Princess and the Frog. It's where the French Market restaurant used to be. This opened in 2023. It is wonderfully themed. You can either do a walk up and wait in a standby line, or you can also mobile order from this dining location. It emphasizes Southern comfort food and a lot of that New Orleans, um, cuisine that you would find if you went to New Orleans itself. So, it is not character dining. This is the one thing a lot of people get confused on. Princess Tiana sometimes appears or wanders around, but it is not a character meal. You are not guaranteed to meet Tiana or any other characters. It's just a little added bonus if they walk through while you are there. The last dining option we're going to talk about is the Royal Street Veranda. This is a quick service location. It is near Pirates of the Caribbean. It's actually up above where you enter kind of more like in the area you'd walk up to go to 21 Royal. And it's a small quick service. You can mobile order, and it has lots of different options. The menu changes a lot. So just check those hours on the Disneyland app and the menu before you go. And of course, there's so much shopping and entertainment in this area that I definitely suggest you spend some time walking around and enjoying it. One of the unique things there is Eudora's, and I hope I'm saying her name right. It's Tiana's mom's chic boutique featuring Tiana's gourmet secrets. So it's themed as a business opened by Tiana and her mother, and it kind of extends that story into New Orleans Square outside of just Tiana's palace. I hope you enjoyed this look over Orleans Square. We only have a couple of weeks left of this, guys. We have, I believe, only 2 lands left. And then we will be wrapping up this series. So tell me one thing that you have learned during the series from any of the lands that has interested you, and put it down in the comments or leave a review and let us know something great that you have learned from Castle Talk Radio Podcast. And we'll see you real soon.